American Pickers stars connect after Frank Fritz's death. American Pickers just returned to the History Channel, and it was the first time it aired since Frank Fritz died. The former co-host died over a year after suffering a stroke. He had been fired from the show before that after recovering from back surgery. Now that he has passed on, Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby have exchanged a sweet back and forth about Frank and their thoughts on each other. American Pickers moving on after Frank Fritz's death. Frank Fritz has not been on American Pickers for a few seasons. However, with the new season coming up, fans might take that idea even harder since he died. While the season was filmed before Frank's death, Mike has said the series will be dedicated in Frank's honor from here on. After this, co-host Danielle Colby responded to Mike by saying, "I love you, brother," with Mike responding, "Love you more, honey," via Newsweek. This also comes after Frank's official cause of death was released. The cause of death is officially late sequela of cerebral infarction, or a stroke that resulted from cerebral vascular disease. Frank was 60. Mike Wolfe claims he wanted Frank Fritz back on American Pickers. After Frank Fritz's death, Mike Wolfe is now saying that he wanted Frank back on American Pickers. Most of the news surrounding Frank leaving the show indicated that Mike had a hand in firing Frank. The two didn't speak for well over a year after Frank's back surgery. It took the stroke to bring them back together again. However, Mike is saying the plan was to get Frank back on the show if his health improved. The timing of this and Frank's passing is not great. However, we have been making shows without Frank for 4 years now, and we have always wanted him to be back with this crew, but he couldn't due to health issues, Mike wrote in an Instagram post. Mike went on to say that they went to see Frank every time they were in Iowa after the stroke to let him know they missed him, and he would never be replaced. As always, since Frank has left, I dedicate this show and all the others this season in his honor, Mike wrote. American Pickers returned to the History Channel with a new season on Wednesday, October 9. Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby are joined by Jersey John and Robbie Wolfe. The sun was setting over the Iowa plains when Mike Wolfe stepped out of his vintage Ford van, the same one he'd driven on countless treasure hunts with Frank Fritz. The horizon glowed in soft oranges and purples, casting long shadows over the quaint farmhouse before him. But the beauty of the evening couldn't shake the somber weight Mike felt deep in his chest. It had been months since Frank Fritz, his longtime partner on American Pickers and lifelong friend, had passed away unexpectedly. The shockwaves of his death rippled through the tight-knit world of antique collectors, fans, and the show's crew. But for Mike, the loss was intensely personal, a hollow emptiness that even the most incredible find couldn't fill. They'd shared decades of adventures together, sorting through the forgotten pieces of American history. Now one half of that equation was gone. As Mike closed the van door, a familiar figure emerged from the farmhouse. Danielle Colby, another staple of American Pickers and one of Mike's closest confidants, greeted him with a warm hug. She, too, had felt the loss of Frank deeply. The three of them had been more than coworkers. They were a family. They had navigated the highs and lows of fame, dealt with the struggles of personal lives under public scrutiny, and supported each other through thick and thin. And now they had to learn how to continue their journey without one of their own. "Hey," Mike said softly, his voice carrying the weight of grief and nostalgia. "Hey yourself," Danielle replied, squeezing his shoulder gently. "How you holding up?" Mike gave her a small, sad smile. "You know, trying. Some days it feels like he's still here, like I could just pick up the phone and call him about some new pick. But then I remember." Danielle nodded, understanding without him needing to finish. She led him inside, where Robbie Wolfe, Mike's brother and occasional co-star on the show, sat at the kitchen table. Robbie looked up as they entered, offering a faint smile. "It's good to see you, man." "You too, Rob," Mike replied as they clasped hands. The room felt heavy with unspoken words, but there was also a quiet comfort in being together. They didn't need to say much. They had all shared this loss, and in each other's company, they found solace. The kitchen was cozy, filled with vintage knickknacks that seemed right out of one of their picks, rustic signs, old metal tins, and well-loved furniture. It was the kind of place Frank would have appreciated, always the first to spot something cool and quirky buried under layers of dust. The trio sat around the table, sipping coffee in the dim light. Eventually, the conversation turned to the memories they shared with Frank. "Remember that time in Texas when Frank tried to haggle with that old lady for the gas station signs?" Robbie asked, a grin spreading across his face. Danielle laughed, her eyes lighting up. Oh, she wasn't having it. She gave him the runaround for like an hour before she finally sold him the signs for more than he was originally offering. Mike chuckled, the memory easing some of the tension. Yeah, Frank never could resist a good haggle. He always said it was part of the fun. "That was Frank," Danielle said, her voice softening. He had a way of connecting with people, making them feel like they were part of something bigger. He could talk to anyone. Didn't matter if they were selling a rusted-out car or a rare neon sign. He made them feel like what they had mattered. Mike nodded, his gaze drifting toward the window where the last sliver of sunlight disappeared. "He made me feel like that, too," he admitted. "Even when we butted heads, God knows we did. Frank was always my partner. We had this rhythm, this understanding. He was my brother." The room fell silent for a moment as they each reflected on their own memories of Frank. He had been a larger-than-life character, his love for the hunt matched only by his loyalty to his friends. Despite the ups and downs, Frank had always been there, right beside Mike, digging through barns and forgotten attics. "Do you think he knew?" Danielle asked after a long pause. "I mean, before he passed, do you think Frank knew how much we loved him?" Mike exhaled slowly, his hands gripping his coffee mug. "I think he did. We had our differences, especially toward the end, but Frank wasn't one to hold grudges. He was stubborn, sure, but he always knew the importance of the people in his life." Robbie leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "It's weird, you know. The show's still going, and we're still doing what we love, but it feels different now. Like there's a hole we can't fill." "It's because there is," Mike said quietly. "Frank was a big part of what made American Pickers what it is. Without him, it's not the same. But that doesn't mean we stop. Frank wouldn't want that." Danielle reached across the table, placing her hand on Mike's. "You're right. He'd want us to keep picking, keep telling the stories of these forgotten treasures. That's what we do best, and it's what he loved." Mike gave her hand a grateful squeeze, feeling a sense of clarity. "Yeah, that's what we'll do. For Frank." The room fell into a comfortable silence, once more as the three friends sat together, united in their grief, but also in their determination to honor Frank's legacy. They would continue the journey they had started together, even if one of them was no longer there to see it through. As the night deepened, Mike stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He walked to the van and opened the back doors, revealing a small collection of items he picked up in the weeks since Frank's passing. Among them was an old wooden sign that read "American Dreams" in faded lettering, a reminder of the passion that had driven Frank and Mike to scour the country in search of forgotten history. Mike stared at the sign for a moment before turning to Danielle and Robbie. "This one's for Frank," he said softly. "Let's keep chasing those American dreams." And in that moment, as the stars began to twinkle in the dark sky above, they knew that Frank's spirit would always be with them on the road ahead.